It was an unseasonably hot day in Los Angeles when the skies began to turn an ominous shade of orange. The dry winds, a hallmark of Southern California, carried a sense of foreboding as they rustled through the trees and swept across the city. News reports had been warning of potential wildfires for days, but no one anticipated how quickly disaster would strike. By mid-afternoon, the fires had ignited and spread with alarming speed, consuming hillsides and neighborhoods alike. People were fleeing their homes, desperately trying to escape the chaos. In the middle of this unfolding catastrophe was the Johnson family: Sarah, her husband Mark, and their two children, Lily and Ben. Their home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood at the edge of the city, had always felt like a sanctuary. But as the flames crept closer, it became a prison. The evacuation order came suddenly, leaving them scrambling to pack essentials and escape. However, in their haste, their car refused to start. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. Mark tried to stay calm, his voice steady as he reassured his family. "We'll figure this out. We just need to stay together and stay safe." Sarah clutched their children tightly, her heart racing as she glanced out the window. The fire was getting closer, the thick smoke making it hard to breathe. Miles away, Jake Carter was driving through LA. A man in his mid-30s, Jake had always been something of a loner. He lived a simple life, working as a mechanic and spending his weekends hiking in the mountains. He didn't consider himself a hero, just someone who tried to do the right thing when he could. That day, he had been running errands when he noticed the growing smoke in the distance. Something in his gut told him to head toward it, even as others were fleeing the area. As Jake drove into the evacuation zone, the scene was surreal. Streets that were normally bustling were eerily empty, abandoned cars left in haste. The sound of sirens and crackling flames filled the air. He had no clear plan, just an instinct to help. Then he saw them. The Johnsons were standing in their front yard, their faces etched with fear. Jake pulled over and rolled down his window. "Do you need help?" he called out. Mark ran toward the car, his voice shaking. "Our car won't start, and the fire is getting too close. Can you give us a ride?" Jake nodded without hesitation. "Get in." The family piled into his truck, the kids clinging to their mother as she whispered words of comfort. Jake wasted no time, driving toward the nearest evacuation route, but the fire was spreading unpredictably, and roads were being closed as flames engulfed them. The air was thick with smoke, making it hard to see. "Hang on," Jake said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. He navigated the winding streets, his eyes scanning for a safe path. The heat was intense, and the fire seemed to be everywhere. Then, as they turned a corner, they saw it, a wall of flames blocking their route. Jake slammed on the brakes, his mind racing. Turning back wasn't an option. The fire was closing in behind them. "We need to find another way," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Mark pointed toward a narrow dirt road leading away from the main street. "Try that way. It's a back route that might still be open." Jake nodded and turned onto the dirt road, the truck bouncing over the uneven terrain. The flames were closer now, the heat almost unbearable. Lily started to cry, and Sarah held her tightly, trying to shield her from the smoke. Jake's grip on the wheel tightened as he focused on getting them to safety. The dirt road led them to a clearing, but the fire was spreading faster than they could drive. Jake spotted an old, abandoned cabin in the distance. "We're not going to make it out this way," he said. "We need to take cover." He drove toward the cabin, pulling up just as the flames reached the edge of the clearing. "Everyone inside now!" he shouted. The family hurried out of the truck and into the cabin. It was small and dilapidated, but it offered some protection. Jake grabbed a blanket from his truck and soaked it in water from a rusty faucet inside the cabin. He used it to seal the gaps around the door and windows, trying to keep the smoke out. The next few hours were harrowing. The fire roared outside, the heat seeping through the walls. Jake stayed by the door, listening for any signs of danger. Sarah and Mark kept the children close, doing their best to stay calm. As the firestorm raged, Jake's mind raced. He couldn't let this be the end for the Johnsons. He had to find a way to get them out. When the flames began to subside, he peeked outside. The air was still thick with smoke, but the worst seemed to have passed. "We need to move now," Jake said. "The fires burned through most of the area, but it's still not safe. We need to find an evacuation center." The family followed him back to the truck, their faces streaked with soot and tears. The road was treacherous, littered with debris and fallen trees. Jake drove carefully, his eyes scanning for danger. Finally, they reached a main road where emergency vehicles were stationed. A firefighter approached them as they pulled over. "Are you all okay?" he asked. Jake nodded. "They need medical attention, but they're safe." The firefighter directed them to an evacuation center where the Johnsons were checked by medics and given food and water. Sarah turned to Jake, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved our lives. I don't know how we can ever thank you." Jake shrugged, a small smile on his face. "I'm just glad you're safe. That's all that matters." As the Johnsons were escorted inside the evacuation center, Jake quietly slipped away. He didn't do it for recognition or praise. He simply did what he felt was right. Weeks later, the Johnsons tried to find Jake to thank him properly, but he seemed to have vanished. It wasn't until Mark took their car to a mechanic that they found him. Jake was working under the hood of a truck, grease on his hands and a modest smile on his face. "Jake!" Mark exclaimed. "We've been looking for you. You saved our lives. Let us do something to repay you." Jake shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad you're all okay." But the Johnsons insisted. They started a fundraiser to support Jake's small garage, rallying their community to show appreciation for the man who had risked everything to save them. The fundraiser exceeded expectations, allowing Jake to expand his business and continue helping others. For Jake, the experience reaffirmed his belief in doing good without expecting anything in return. And for the Johnsons, it was a lesson in the profound impact of kindness and courage. In the face of the LA fires, a stranger became their hero, and their lives were forever changed. Share your thought in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I pour my heart into crafting stories like this for you, and your support is the one helps me keep going. I appreciate having you on this journey,